NORSCA. NORSCA is a peninsula located in the far north of the old world, lying on the doorstep of the Chaos Wastes itself. It is bordered to the south by the frigid waters of the Sea of Claws, to the north by the Kraken Sea and the Realm of Chaos, and to the east by the roving Kurgan tribes of the steppes. Suffused with the unholy energies of chaos by its proximity to the ruined warp gate that lies at the northern pole, it is a brutal realm where no one ruler holds sway. Instead, the bleak and brutal landscape is divided amongst the barbaric kingdoms and territories of many bloodthirsty and warlike tribes, ruled by dark armored chaos champions blessed by the favor of their gods, and who are thus held up as akin to royalty by their brethren. NORSCA is inhabited by a race of savage and ferocious men known as the Norskans, Norsemen, or the Norse. Fur-clad warriors and berserkers of hairy brawn who sail the seas in fearsome longships in order to unleash their devastating fury upon the south. Warlike and cruel, the Norse are the very epitome of the warriors of chaos, fanatically devoted champions of the dark gods and the baneful scourge of their foes. The sheer brutality of their raids has been felt as far abroad as the Witch King's baleful domain of Nagaroth and the mysterious realm of Cathay. For the men of NORSCA are reckoned to be perhaps the most adept sailors and navigators in all the world, unequaled by any in their courage and reckless thirst for conquest. The Norsemen are, without exception, great warriors, blessed with incredible strength at arms and fearsome demeanors. It is the dream of nearly every member of this fierce people to ascend to the ranks of the greatest warriors, to become mighty champions of chaos and bear the dread marks of their gods' ruinous favor. NORSCA is a savage and brutal land, plagued by lethal winters for more than half the year, and worse, lashed perpetually by raging gales of chaos energies howling down from the ancient ruins of the fallen warp gate, resting at the very heart of the northern chaos wastes. As such, no sane human being would be able to survive in this harsh wasteland with their sanity intact. It is for this reason that most, if not all, the tribes of NORSCA are affected to some extent by the power of chaos, causing their flesh to warp and mutate through the influences of their gods, and their minds to be plunged into the darkest depths of the most violent insanity. The Norskans see these alterations as the blessings of their dreadful deities, which empower them to strive above and conquer all who oppose them. Hard-bitten and warlike, the men of NORSCA are the greatest of all the warriors of the Dark Gods. I spent a year in that hellish place. Can you believe it? For 6 months straight, it was dark. The sun barely came over the horizon. And let me tell you, those were the most dangerous 6 months of my life. From Mikkel Kraus, a random mercenary. Geographically, NORSCA is, for the most part, a frozen boreal wasteland bereft of all trappings of civilization, albeit one so large that it could fit the entirety of the Empire into it several times over. Stalked by all manner of gruesome monsters, the tales old worlders tell of it fail to fully encapsulate its brutality. Few crops grow here, for the land is hard as iron, and the howling winds cut like daggers of purest cold. And it is for this scarcity that the Northmen have learned to spurn the sickle and plowshare, instead deigning to take what they need to survive from the lands of weaker men with the axe and sword. A network of fjords and mist-clouded isles wreathes the coasts, and it is from here that the Northmen build and tether the longships with which they terrorize the shores of the known world. Scattered coastal settlements provide some respite from the harshness of the elements, but even they are regularly assaulted by blood krakens and other such horrors. Further inland, however, the great fjords give way to frozen steppes where brutal tribesmen hunt their game, taking care to avoid the bone-carpeted lairs of ice drakes. It is a grim, shadowy land where the weak do not live long, and where living means a constant fight for survival, supremacy, and the chance to appease the dark gods. The landscape is famed chiefly for its mighty and foreboding mountain ranges, such as the Jotunheims, the Mountains of Frost and Dusk, and the Mountains of Tajazi. The mountains themselves are cloaked in local myth and history, and are sometimes named for ruined fortresses sitting atop their icy peaks, or for mighty and legendary beasts that nest amongst the crags and defiles. Though the mountains dominate the country's interior, they are far from the only feature. Massive stretches of forest mark a great deal of the land. Ancient taigas that house foul secrets of the dark gods, as well as ferocious beasts of unnatural strength and power. To the north, immense seas of glacial pack ice stretch down and cover nearly the entirety of the upper half of the country, rendering NORSCA as a glaciated wasteland. These ice fields form the frozen sea along the north, the great strait that separates NORSCA from the true chaos wastes. Massive frozen glaciers are a common sight, particularly in the Arctic climes of the northernmost parts of the country. The Great Hellworm Glacier is one of the most well-known of these, having been the site of a climactic battle between the iron-clad chaos warriors of Falgar the Butcher and the undead legions of Setra the Imperishable, during the fabled War of Sand and Snow. The great ice field of Drergan Mort too has played host to mighty conflicts between the Bersonling tribe and their rivals, particularly the tribes of Kurgan. Many times have the Norse emerged victorious from that field of death, proving their strength in the eyes of their infernal masters. The seas of NORSCA are just as dangerous as the land itself, for amidst the frigid waves of the Sea of Chaos prowl the fearsome black longships crewed by barbarians and mastered by the terrible champions of chaos who reave and raid as they will, bringing bloody battle to any ship cursed with the misfortune of crossing them. From the ports and fjords of the Norse lands do the terrible chaos fleets sail, harboring cargoes of bloodthirsty marauders intent on putting civilization to fire and blade. Moreover, the icy cold of the Sea of Claws is itself as much the bane of sailors as the savage seafaring warriors who ride its waves, with winds so cold they freeze the very spray, causing knives of frost to pierce the flesh and freeze extremities. And deep below the tides lie creatures that have been touched with the grace of chaos that capsize ships and feast upon the flesh of men. Small wonder, then, that men grow vicious and cruel in these lands. Harsh lands breed harsh folk, and the Norscans have been moulded into some of the fiercest and most violent warriors to blight the earth. A race of ferocious raiders who must kill and plunder in order to survive. However, during the summer months, the air warms just enough to enliven the sparse stretches of land suitable for farming, which serves to supplement the Norscans' common diet of fish, bear flesh, and the meat of the far less savory creatures that prowl the wilderness. All other months, however, the land is deathly cold, and unnatural snowstorms are a constant, made all the worse by the unholy winds blowing down north from the Chaos Wastes. Half the year is a dim twilight, the sun barely a disk of light hanging low on the horizon. Within the land itself lies things warped and changed by the loosed energies of chaos that permeate this ancient land. Though there is, however, wealth hidden amongst its terrible dangers, the mountains that hide veins of gold and iron, as well as other precious metals. Beyond all this, there is the warp stone, the very essence of chaos given form in the world, which saturates the ground so that the very land is infused with it. Though NORSCA's distance and danger is a potent deterrent to keep all but the bravest of merchants from travelling there, the rare treasures hidden amongst its dangers yet provides a tantalizing lure for the courageous and mad to make the journey north and risk their lives under a Norseman's blade, and their immortal souls upon their bloody altars. The most striking features of NORSCA, raised by mortal and immortal hands alike, are the great monoliths that dot the primeval wilderness. These ungodly monuments serve as focal points for channeling the raw power of chaos, and sorcerers who find themselves near these constructs will likely find their powers greatly augmented by their proximity. Those with the courage to look upon the monoliths more closely are likely to find runic inscriptions in the Norscan tongue written clearly upon them. These inscriptions often foretell the sagas of the great heroes of NORSCA, the champions of chaos. Chaos monoliths, as they are known, are towering runestones raised by the Norse tribes for the commemoration of some legendary tribal hero or king, for some deed of martial majesty that won that figure the renown of the dark gods. Monoliths are most often raised with stone, but can also be composed of more esoteric material, as a result of NORSCA's otherworldly qualities. Bone, bloody flesh, marble, precious gems, and so on are all examples of materials chaos monoliths may be composed of. Wealthier tribes are able to commission monoliths to be crafted by the chaos dwarves of Zorn-Uzkul, who are said to cast the great runestones in brass polished to a mirror sheen that reflects not the countenance of the onlooker, but the savage visage of the warlord the monolith commemorates. Monoliths serve as commemorators of heroes and kings, repositories of the histories of the Norscan people. But they also serve as markers of tribal territories or the holdings of warbands. Monoliths quickly become places of pilgrimages among the northern tribes, and most Norskans will not pass one without leaving an offering of some kind, or at least reciting the saga written upon it. The Norsemen believe that the gods themselves watch over the monoliths, protecting it from the ravages of time and judging the worth of those who come before them. Monoliths may sometimes stand watchful over cairns of fallen champions, where the bodies of the dead heroes are interred, often with their weapons and armors, making them a tempting, albeit difficult, target for would-be grave robbers. Aside from the monoliths, the lands of NORSCA are dotted with massive great halls of the various tribes. Expansive thatched structures constructed of oak and pine, where the tribes gather to feast and carouse and prepare themselves for their campaigns of rape and slaughter against their enemies. Most Norscan halls are massive structures, but a fair few are titanic even by northern standards. The Great Hall of the Snegger that lies in the land of the Scalings, or the Great Hall of Strovengard, home to the fearsome Egil Styrbjorn, are but two grandiose examples of truly legendary great halls. There is also the Great Hall of Urslo, home to the ferocious Ursfjordings, and the infamous Bjork and his bear men. Then there are fortresses. Norscan fortresses are not quite as ostentatious or grand as those erected by the civilized nations of the Old World, but still, these barbaric fastnesses are highly defendable positions, ruled over by the mightiest kings and warlords of the land. The fortresses of Chaos number among them the Doom Keep, the Forbidden Citadel, the Altar of the Crimson Harvest, and the Tower of Karak. The great fortress of Ormfell also exists in the lands of the Zals, erected at the place where the great Zal hero Omre defeated a terrible serpent and set its bones into his throne. Centuries later, the Zal king Ulgra Troll-Eater marched southwards alongside the ever-chosen Asavar Kul and shattered the walls of Kislev, carrying the rubble back to Norsca to set as a reinforcement of his ancestral seat's ancient defences. At one point, the demon fortress of Bagayar, the Great Witch, stood in the lands of the Scalings, but was long ago laid low by the Chaos champion known as Wulfric the Wanderer, who led an army of warriors to conquer the demon fastness and its unholy mistress, slicing off the arms of Bagayar and boiling her alive in her own cauldron in order to steal the great longship known as the Sea Fang.